response to Nirmala.
I was going to say, Nirmala, do you want to add to what he's telling us?
Just come and give us a response.
Tell us the truth.
Thank you.
Morning. It was true that I wasn't looking at Bonnie, I was looking at Reg. But now I'm glad I didn't marry Reg. Well, it was an arranged marriage and I think it was God's will and it all worked out and we're still together for 35 years. We've just celebrated 35 years. And yeah, he is very good with tennis. He can beat all those white guys half his age. So I think he's good. And why I like it is because he brings back some gifts. like a cutlery set or a ice cooler box or whatever the gift is. So I like that for that. Of course he's away from home, so I shout at him as well. And he plays music for the church, which is good. And we run a Bible study for the non-Christians in Zimbabwe, and they're all Gujaratis. They are the only white rhinos, which is South Indians. And white rhinos are the extinct species. So it's been good. We never thought we could do it, and quite a few have come to know the Lord. And so I think we're quite grateful that we had the chance to do it. Yeah, I think that's it.
Thank you, Nirmala. Please.
Oh, wow. There comes the man.
More ready to share and some are not quite there. So if anybody is really particular that they need to wait for tomorrow, just let me know that. Otherwise, I'm just going to call on people in a random fashion. I'm not picking on anybody, but I will eventually. So just let me know your preferences.
Can I start?
Yes, please.
Good afternoon.
Are you photographing us?
Yeah. I have a little tools coming. These are my movie glasses.
I hold the glass.
Explain that.
Yeah, all I gotta say is, okay, glass. Anyway, good afternoon.
We can't see you. Please get up and speak.
My little talk here will be more sobering and more reflective.
Can't hear.
Can you hear me now? Okay. Because when the mic gets too close to the mouth, then the voice gets distorted.
No, we don't have to.
Yeah, so softly. Okay, let's start. I won't take too much time, but I'll be reflective and give you some of my thoughts, my deep thoughts.
Is it possible to stand up?
You want to project it?
No, these are just crib notes. So, would standing up help?
Yes.
Okay.
It gives you more authority.
Then we move on.
He says you can look down
I
on
think
it.
people just want to be able to see.
The problem is, if I stand up, I'll be looking down, and my gaze goes. I told videographer I can sit down.
But do what you want. Do what you want. People just wanted to see you, but
Okay.
we can see you on the
Okay. You can always see me. Okay, let's start. I'm going to give you a little outline of myself, where I come from, what I have been doing, and where I'm going. Some of my thoughts, my reflections, and more seriously, my views on life, and other things that might be a little different from some of the things you might have expected. So, a little bit about myself, a couple of personal things. I was born in 1946 in Sri Lanka. At that time the country was called Ceylon, and given the name of Faris Ahmed Munas. My intimate acquaintances now call me Phil, and that is the name I use in my writings and my publications, covers of Phil Munas. And I like that name, so feel free to call me Phil. My family was in the shipping business, and when I was 10, the whole family moved to India. Besides my dad and mom, we were 8 of us, 4 boys and 4 girls. And I was the 4th, sort of in the middle of the social. We moved to India, to Kodampakkam in Madras, after my parents acquired a movie studio, which they renamed Broad Studios, and I grew up in the movie studio, large campus, and they built a house there, and that's where I grew up until I became 12. Very impressionable, very naive. I was lucky to be accepted to CMC level. I was all 17. I think we joined in April, June. That August I turned 18, so I was 17 when I joined. And I spent the better part of 6 years, almost 7 years, with all you wonderful people, got to know you, interacted with you, and became a doctor. One of the most vivid experiences for me when I was at Vellore was to volunteer as a physician during the East Pakistan War of Independence, when Bangladesh was established. I just finished my internship then, and so I was a fully qualified doctor, licensed. And I set out to the border between then East Pakistan and India. There was this amazing place called Tentulia. It sprung up overnight. It was called Tentulia simply because it was a sea of tents. At that time, and these are astronomical numbers, 10 million people fled the war. It was a very brutal war. When it was right after the 1971 elections, and East Pakistan, which was more populous, had the majority in the National Assembly, and would have formed government. People who elected the MPs from East Pakistan, or the Awami League Party would have formed the government. Of course, the military dictatorship in West Pakistan annulled the elections and unleashed a brutal military attack on East Pakistan. 3 million people were massacred, killed. Now these are figures more than less and less than this that have been put around. 3 million is a reasonable figure. That's the figure that's given out by the Bangladesh government today. And it was unbelievable. And the cruelty, the inhumanity, the depravity, the senseless violence is simply mind-boggling. And it is important to remember that is all part of human nature, and it's also part of us. And when we are critical of these things, we have to look into our own selves and see where all this comes from. But I will leave that for another day. Some of that I have addressed in this book, this novel I write. Anyway, I was there not too long, 4 months, and at that young age, to be exposed to this type of brutality so most of it went right over me. And I didn't quite absorb. I have over the years. I left there, came back, went back to Colombo. And right after that, I was offered a fellowship in pharmacology at Temple University in the United States. So I left in 1972 and came to the US and have been there since. I did the fellowship in pharmacology, 2 years of fellowship in pharmacology. And following that, I did a year of internship and took my state licensing examinations and got licensed as a physician in the United States. And for a year, I just hung up my shingle and practiced medicine after a year of internship. In those days, you could do that. I did that for a year and then realized that I needed more postgraduate training, and I joined the psychiatry residency program. I did a year of that in Philadelphia at Temple University, the same place where I had done my pharmacology fellowship. And at the end of that period, I thought that I needed to reflect more and figure out, what direction to head in. So I just took a year off. I had some money with me that I had earned during that year of private practice. So I just went off to New Orleans. New Orleans is a fascinating place. Got myself a flat right in the heart of the French Quarter on Bourbon Street. And I lived upstairs in the flat, and you could look down right into Bourbon Street and see all the tamasha going on all day. And I was getting high, writing poetry, reflecting on life, meeting a lot of interesting people, going out, 2 o'clock, buying food, coming back, eating, getting high again, sleeping. It was really reflective time. It made me think about many things, but I also became broke. I didn't work. I took the whole year off, had no income, used up all the money I had accumulated in my year of private practice. So I went back to residency training. I'd already done my PG2 year. I'd done my 1 year of internship, which was PG1, and then a year of psychiatry residency. So I did a PG3 year in rural psychiatry, way out in the middle of nowhere. There was a pretty well-known institute in Iowa called the Mental Health Institute in Cherokee, Iowa, which was fairly famous for rural psychiatry. So I did my PG3 year there, cold, particularly cold, near the Black Hills, where those huge statuettes of the American presidents are, not far from Sioux Falls, South Dakota, Sioux City, Iowa. Spent a year there. Then I figured I needed to get back to civilization. So I transferred from there for my final year to Chicago Medical School in Chicago, where I completed my final year of residency, my PG4 year. And then they sort of liked me there in Chicago Medical School and said, you stay on and do a year of clinical fellowship with us. So I did a clinical fellowship in psychiatry, a 5th year of postgraduate training, and completed that, and they recruited me onto the academic university staff. And I taught there. I was a full-time academic faculty as an assistant. I started off as an assistant professor. Initially, after I left that different place, I ended up as a clinical professor later on. And I did my and I worked there for approximately 3 years, and I got my dates here. That's why I was writing down here. I've done so many things that it's hard to remember. I left there in 1979. I finished my stint with the university, with Chicago Medical School, and then moved on to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I was offered a job there with the Milwaukee County Mental Health Institute. While in Chicago, the medical school itself is based on the VA campus, and I was also working at the VA. That was a private teaching hospital for the medical school. And my good friend Varghese came by and visited me briefly there. We said hello to each other, and that was the first time I had run into any of my classmates before. So I then went on to Milwaukee and finished, worked at the Milwaukee County Mental Health Complex, and then went into private practice. I had a very successful private practice. It just took off. Made a lot of money, invested in stock market, became quite wealthy, and figured I needed to retire now. I had done enough. And in anticipation of retirement, I moved back. I was looking for a place to retire, and I selected a place in the middle of the United States, bought a farm there, and built a house there. And for a few years, I worked at the VA and was on the clinical faculty at Southern Illinois University, taught students, medical students, residents, and then retired altogether in 2004. After I retired, the stock market crashed in 2008, wiped out about 60% of my retirement earnings. And I went back to work for the prison system. Very, very nice job, and I'm glad I did that. Worked 3 years, almost 3 years, as a consultant in 3 different prisons. Saw a lot of things, eye-opening, mind-boggling stuff. And then in 2010, I retired completely after that stint of 3 years. Now, so that's sort of my background. Just a couple of things, and then I'll stop. Some of the reflections I have, I'm going to read this out because I've written it, and it's better to just read it out rather than speak extemporaneously. Family and personal. I have remained comfortably single all my life, never been married, and opted out of having children. I have had many intimate and loving relationships and feel very fortunate that none of them have been and feel that none of them that have succeeded, those that have succeeded and flourished over the years, felt the need to corral me into an exclusive and exclusionary interpersonal relationship. For that supreme gift and consideration, I shall be forever thankful to them, these people. I have been and believed, I have seen and believed from a very young age that you enter the world alone and exit alone, single and unaccompanied by anyone. No one comes into this world with you, and none will offer to leave it with you. In this regard, I have faithfully followed the consistent doctrine recommended by all the great thinkers, philosophers, and cosmogonies that have ever informed humankind of life and living. I am therefore able to consider myself without conflict or favoritism, everyone equally as my personal family. Since this is an honest exercise in self-revelation, I must faithfully note to my esteemed audience that I do not believe in religion in any incarnation, shape, fashion, or form. I arrived at this conclusion after much thought and reflection and a serious study of the various original scriptures that are now considered an utter waste of time. Religion, of course, served an evolutionary purpose in the past 50,000 years or so, since behavioral modernity first appeared in Homo sapiens during their 200,000-year evolutionary history. In the modern era, religion has exhausted its purpose and is now a counterproductive, divisive, tribal, and destructive force responsible for elimination of billions of people. Some estimate as many as a third of humankind in the last 1,500 years. Religion will surely disappear over the next several generations, as statistical trends clearly indicate. I want to be among the first out. Anyway, I'll leave you with a couple of lines from the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam about life. And this is from the Edward Fitzgerald's translation. And if the wine you drink, the lip you press, ends in where all begins and ends in yes, think. You are today what yesterday you were. Tomorrow you shall not be less.
Thank you, colleagues. Obviously, you've done a lot of thinking. You're leaving us with a lot of things to think about. Thanks for taking the time to do that. Where's Michael? You're up.
Friends, first I would like to say a big thank you to Susie and Joyce and Vinod. But Susie was the person who finally found this a lost sheep. After I left Vellore in 1971, January, I had not been in contact with anyone except the secretary of our college, but for a short period only. Thanks. And then I lost contact with him too. But about a couple of months ago, while I was busy one morning in my practice, one of my receptionists disturbs me and tells me, "Hey, could you please take this call? You have got a doctor friend of yours calling you from overseas." So I asked her, I said, "Who is doctor friend? I have no one. I don't know. Are they in Australia?" She said, no, you better take this call. They're calling from overseas. So I said, all right. I took the call, and here is Susie. And that was it. And that made my day. And the whole of that day, I could not concentrate any further on my consultations. And at present, in my general practice, about 70% is pediatrics, these little kids. I don't know how it happened, but it happened. And they're all lined outside, waiting for me to see them. But I had to slow down, think, I have to think what Susie told me and what I was talking to the kids about. So that's how it happened. And today, from such a diversified class to a totally unified, it's such a wonderful sight to see. And it's great to be here. And another thing that I must mention is that when I first came to Vellore, or started from Tampere, Madras Christian College, I did not know where I was going. I did not even know where Vellore was. But certain things happened, and I finally landed at Vellore, where I still don't understand how I managed the way things worked out, and it finally did. From there onwards, well, I went back to Fiji, where I was born, practiced there for 3 years, three and a half years, and then we were offered a job in Australia, so we came to Australia, where I worked in Tasmania, which is the smallest state of Australia, for 14 years before moving on to the mainland. And we are now settled in Shell Harbour, which is about an hour and a half's drive from Sydney, and I'm in full-time practice, and I'm quite happy with what I'm doing at the moment. We have 3 children. All of them are grown up, and they are now on their own. So only 2 of us left at home. And it was, if it was not for what CMC made me during those 6 years, I do not think I will be, or I would have been able to achieve what I have achieved today. And just while talking about this, I would like to share a small story regarding a little patient of mine. It happened about 3-4 months ago. This little girl, she's only 4 years old. She knows me very well. She came, she said, Dr. Eddie, she was actually crying. She said, I want you to get me better very quickly. And she was sick. She was sick. Ever seen her before. She could not breathe. She was coughing like mad. So I said, all right, Lucy, what happened? You tell me. So the mum started talking, and they were all both very worried about her. Now, to Lucy, I said, Lucy, I will get you better. Don't you worry about it. She said, are you sure, Dr. Reddy? She never asked those questions. She said, are you sure? I said, I'm sure. So I said to her, I said, all right. I examined her, found she had chest infection. So I gave her the appropriate drugs, a script for that. And I said, listen, I want you to do one thing, Lucy. You go home, stay in bed, and make sure you do one thing. I'm only giving you the prescription for this medication, but you must pray. She looked at me, she said, what did you say? I said, you must pray that you will get better. So you will get better, and I'm going to pray for you too. So off she goes. I said to the mother, bring her back to me on Friday. This was Monday. Come Friday, Lucy comes bouncing back through that door, smiled one side to the other, and she had a little thing in her hand. She said, Dr. Reddy, look at this, what I've got for you. I said, Lucy, I want to know how you feel first. She said, look, I feel better now. I said, hey, how come? Because she had pneumonia. Her x-rays that we did showed she had bilateral early bronchopneumonia. So anyway, she was better, she was feeling better, she looked better. So I said to her, I said, Lucy, did you pray? She said, I did. I said, whom did you pray to? She said, I prayed to God. And she said, did you pray for me? I said, yes, Lucy. I said, I didn't get you better. I said, he got you better. Do you know that? Oh, no. She said, you are my doctor. You got me better. I said, Lucy, sit down, let's talk. So we talked. And to this little girl, she's very incredible. And what she had brought me was she had made one of these, what do you call, loom bands. It's an American thing recently taken up with the kids. That's right. She brought me one of those. She made it. While she was in bed, she was making this. She brought it for me. It still sits on my, what you call the computer monitor. So since then, told Lucy, because she has become an even better little friend since then, I've told her, I said, listen, I'm only treating you, but I'm not the person who's finally getting rid of your illness. It's someone else, Lucy. It took me a while to convince her, but she's only a 4-year-old, and now she comes to me, she's asked me the question, are you still praying, Dr. Reddy? Every time they come, she asks me. I said, yes, Lucy, I pray. I pray to him, so he helps me help you. And when I was coming, I normally tell my patients, look, I want next 2 weeks or next 3 weeks, see one of the other doctors in the group. And she said, why? She said, I'm going somewhere, Lucy, so I have to have some rest. I need a holiday. She said, who is going to look after me? So I said, Lucy, I told you there is someone else. So Lucy said, who? I said, I told you. You pray to God. He'll look after you. So Lucy is now praying that she doesn't get sick, or if she does get sick, someone else is there to look after her. So when I go back, I have to tell her, yes, I was still praying for you, but someone else is still looking after you. So that taught me one of these things, and it took me back to Vellore again. From when I started, I had nothing, I knew nothing much as to which way I was going, but when I left Vellore, it made a total difference to me in my outlook of life. Here we are.
Thank you, Michael. We're about a half hour before lunch. Are people okay with keeping on listening to each other? I don't think we're going to get lunch until 1 o'clock. So even if we get out of here, we're not going to get there. How about we take Joyce and then we'll stop? Joyce.
I think this has been an exciting morning for me. I thought I was the one who had kept in touch with the largest number of you over the years, and there were so many things that I heard today that were totally new. And that shows that you really don't get to know anybody completely. But I've also been thinking about those of us who have not managed to make it to the reunion. And so just to keep them in the loop, I thought I'll share some thoughts about some of the people who haven't got here. So looking back, as I said yesterday, I have felt particularly blessed because by staying on in Vellore, by coming back to Vellore after I left, that was what gave me the opportunity to catch up with so many of you over the years. Somebody referred to the disintegrated batch that we were. And I remember the consultation at Vellore in 1990. For those of you who are not familiar with the term, this is an exercise that happens every 10 years, where directions are set for the next 10 years. I rejoined Vellore in 85, and I had done a 2-year stint assisting in the registrar's office. Again, partly due to the class, due to Dalip, I had got drawn into the CMAI, and I was involved largely with the lab training committee, that is, training of lab technicians. That was one of the well-run programs of CMAI. And we had about 25 lab training schools all over India. And there are not many doctors who were active in the program. They were largely the tutor technicians. And I think largely by virtue of being one of the few doctors interested, I got co-opted into something called the Central Education Board of CMAI. And at that time, they were having difficulty with their radiographers training programs. There were 8 schools all over India, patchy quality, students were unhappy, faculty were unhappy. So Dalip asked me to be one of a 2-member team to evaluate these 8 radiology schools and see whether we could adapt some of the systems of the lab training committee for the radiographers. It was an exciting adventure because I traveled from Kashmir to Punjab down to Kanyakumari. Vijayan was a medical superintendent in Kanyakumari. And the last training center I had to evaluate was at Vellore. There were 3 courses in Vellore. And we had made a format to write our report. And when I evaluated the programs in Vellore, I realized they were actually the worst run among all. And it didn't strike me that I was ruffling feathers because I just wrote our honest impression. And it was an eye-opener for me because having been a medical student in Vellore, we were so privileged. We had a certain amount of independence as Women's Hostel, as Students' Association. And there were these children of approximately the same age as we had been, who were really like, an unpaid workforce, working the same hours as the staff, doing night shifts, no recreational activities. Most of them were day scholars, courses of 1 to 2 years duration, and who had absolutely no bonding with the institution. And that somehow that contrast between the medical students and the allied health students struck me. And so I wrote a rather adverse report about CMC, and I was summoned shortly afterwards by Dr. Rachel Mathai, who was a medical superintendent, and she took it very personally because these courses were under the medical superintendent's office. Well, we were a 2-member team. The other person was not from CMC. So we stuck. We didn't change our evaluation. We also reported back to Dalip. And it was the same situation with the training programs. And then I looked back at the lab training programs. Though the course content and the training was good, the same problems of the students were there in the lab training programs as well. And I think that became a bit of a mission for me. And so at this consultation, just before the consultation, I was asked to take over as vice principal for the Allied Health Sciences. It was a new post created. And my remit was to organize the Allied Health Science courses and shift them from under the medical superintendent's office into the principal's office and make them into educational programs, as far as possible trying to bring some kind of parity with the medical students. And it was a challenge to do that. But the reason I'm saying this here is, at that consultation, it was a week-long consultation. We looked at education, we looked at patient services, research, administration. There was a topic per day. So under education, medical education, nursing education, allied health, postgraduate training, there were several subdivisions. And I was given this little bit of allied health sciences. So in the weeks preceding this, I had meetings with the different departments running the courses, and then I had a meeting with all of them together, and we came up with a blueprint for how we wanted allied health sciences to develop. Now, to the consultation, we had Murthy invited as the consultant for psychiatric services. We had Sitaram to help us formulate policies for research. I had Vijayan representing mission hospitals, and Dalip from CMAI. And they were actually in different sections of the consultation. So after I made my presentation, we broke into small groups for discussion. And to my great surprise, when I reached my small group, I had this whole phalanx of classmates sitting there. And we had a discussion, and I was really amazed. Now, if you had asked me just before that how close I was, or how close as friends of mine were these group of people, they would have been very low down on my list, actually. Most of my close friends were the girls. But I cannot describe that feeling of affirmation and support that I felt at that meeting, because they were so much into the discussion. They had such fantastic ideas. None of them was involved in paramedical education except Dalip as part of the CMAI. But I got these fantastic suggestions. And I still remember Murthy sitting with me to write my report and correcting everything that I said. So at the plenary, without quite intending to, I had hijacked the consultation. It became a consultation about paramedical education. And the first line was, it's not to be called paramedical anymore. It is to be designated as allied health sciences. And after the consultation, I realized I had again ruffled a lot of feathers, and there was quite a lot of misunderstanding about what I was trying to do. But the reason I'm saying this here is, those friendships that started there have really progressed over the years. And, you know, we've met at several different fora. I've worked with these people. I've worked with Vijayan closely on the board of CMAI, and we've taken the CMAI through some very troubled times. And I think the one person, if I was facing a sticky situation, I was the president of the CMAI board, and Vijayan was the editor, so we were the two executive members. And, you know, if there was a difference of opinion, and I'd call up Vijayan for advice, we'd start out by arguing at two ends of the spectrum of opinion, and then we would be able to work a consensus. And he was like my backbone in the CMAI through those difficult times. So as I look back, I mean, many people have said, we were disintegrated and we have become integrated. I think the integration was somewhere there, inherent. Because what I've realized is the basic attitudes, the values, the approach, and the kind of commitment to certain basic principles is something that we share. I think we were probably too young and too immature to realize it then, but it's something that has grown over the years. I was back from a fundraising trip in the USA, the run-up to the centenary celebrations. I inherited 3 huge projects from Dr. Martin: the centenary building, the centenary endowment for the poor patients, and then there was a sort of cluster of miscellaneous things, which was mainly expensive types of hospital equipment, and there was no one near reaching the target. And Vijayan had come for council meeting, and I still remember him coming to the office. And of course, I moaned to him about the hard times I was having. And then he said, "What have you done?" So I said, "I went here and I spoke here, and you know, these people had promised this much, and it doesn't look like they're going to give it." And at the end of it, he said, "You know, I think the director should spend more time on her knees and less time on the plane." And that was advice which I did not appreciate at that moment. But looking back, I realized that was sound advice. So I just want to say that we're not as diverse as we think we are. And I think there is something that holds us together through hard times. I have had so many messages of prayer and of support. And I really want to thank you all for that. I meant this to be light relief.
Yeah, that's what
But
you said.
yeah, but I think I got a bit distracted. So I just wanted to say that I hope we can do this again. Maybe not next year, but maybe a couple of years into the future. And of course, what I've acquired most of all through this reunion is a new mother-in-law. So Susie, thank you. And I think she's helped me to lighten up a lot during this process. So I just wanted to say it's been fun doing this.
Thank you, Joyce. It's an interesting observation, because we keep saying, and people keep saying to me, we need to lighten it up, we need to make it a little more fun, and all those things. And I really want to do that as well. But I think coming together after such a long time, we have so much to share that we never did. Things that matter to us, things that are important to us individually. That is going to continue to be a challenge to keep that balance. So what I'm going to try to do this afternoon is to catch up with the people that haven't spoken yet, and I'll try to kind of balance out, from what I understand, my humble understanding of people's style, to try to not put people to sleep, since it's going to be a post-lunch session. But we do have a good block of time. We still have at least 15 people who are in this room that haven't had a chance to speak, and I would like to come back to Joel and Vinod and so on, to hear the other side of what's important to them in their lives. So let's take a break, get some lunch. Everybody, please have coffee. You have to promise to be awake this afternoon as well. Thank you. Just a quick thought. I don't think they're going to, Vinod, are they going to serve us lunch now if we go down? So we have about 10-15 minutes. We can walk around. Cyril has some slides. Joel has some slides. Padu, you have some slides? So if we want to see some slides, we can walk around in this room and look at them, and we can continue to do that through the course of the next day and a half.
Hello, check. Hello. 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 Hello.
Consultant group, listen everybody, up and ready. So we have hired a consultant to get us moving and off this lunchtime slump. I would like to introduce our consultant of the day, the ever talented. All right, so she's going to take over and get us awake.
Hey, you should do the movie.
Okay,
Can we have everybody at the back? Everybody go to the back. Everybody go to the back. With a partner. Yes, with a partner. Rohini, we can't hear you.
Okay, everybody on this side with a partner.
Are these chairs supposed to be like this?
Yes. Okay, George, you're my partner.
Okay, find a partner. Everybody, find a partner.
Okay, everybody back here with a partner.
Hello. What about your partner? Please try not to make this an issue of sexuality.
One partner, not a whole chain. I know.
But do we have to have our wives?
We have to line up. Should we line up? Bhaktraj, up!
All right. Now, all of
To play the music.
Vinod, Bhaktiraj is your partner.
What are you supposed to do? Play music. Find a partner and get us back. We are crossing the river. You have to cross this river. Okay, listen crowd, stop.
Madhu, thank you. All right. This is a very famous river that we all know. Yeah, Philip is there. Yeah. Where's Philip?
And you have to cross.
And you have to cross this river if you are going to Vesello. And that is a Pala river. Okay? So this is the Pala river. Everybody can see the blue waves of the Pala river. Can you see it? Yes. All right. It's a flood. Stop the fish. Don't stop the fish. No, I'm not. Philip, Vinod is a partner.
With your handbag, that's a good idea.
You've been doing that for a long
No
time.
conflict of interest.
There's Michael. Michael has to join him.
Okay. Now, when the music starts, please cross the river. It's in flood. Cross the river as fast as you can and then come around either this way or that way. Come back here and recross the river. But if the music stops when you're crossing the river, you're drowned. That's the point. Okay, so let's dance. Music, please. You can sit down.
You didn't become my partner, that's why. How can they?
Can we cheat? Can we cheat? No, they've already cheated.
Just about.
Everybody, please sit down. Please sit down. Please sit down, everybody. Thank you. Please saving me. Sit down. Sit down. Sit down. The winner. No, you wanted to sit down. Yeah, sit down. Okay, and now I am going to call upon. I'm going to call upon one significant other, Mrs. Raju Abraham. Please come. I'm going to call upon you to please felicitate and applaud the winners of this two very prestigious gifts. Yeah, please come and give them. Well done. All right.
Thank you to our consultant.
Good afternoon. Once when I was invited to speak in North India, they wanted to introduce me, the pastor. So he said, Dr. Shah, what kind of a doctor are you? So I said, I'm a pediatric surgeon. So he said, what does pediatric mean? So I said, it means relating to children. So when the time came to introduce me, he said, this is Dr. Vinod Shah. He's a childish surgeon. I will leave the heavy parts of the of the story and then just tell you some interesting parts of some real life incidents that happened. As you know, I've straddled 4 organizations. Firstly, I started working with an organization called the Indian Evangelical Mission. And the reason I started with that was because it was a body that was fully supported by the Indian church, and I wanted to be fully Indian and to be supported by the Indian church and to be doing, sort of rural tribal work. And so, Shalini and myself, we decided to go to, we had, sort of very romantic idea of going to a remote tribal area into a jungle and then starting a hospital and all that sort of thing. So Shalini initially did some research and then found that Bhil tribe in northern part of Gujarat, that is not very far from the Pakistan border, was a very needy area, and there were about 1 million people, Bhili people. The word Bhil means bow and arrow. And so we went to a place called Data. No one has heard of that place before. And we went and took a house on rent. And then on the first day, we had breakfast and we had an egg or something. And some eggshells were thrown out, were kept outside, in the dustbin. And then immediately the house owner saw that, and then he got angry and kicked us out because, you're not supposed to be eating non-vegetarian food. So we moved into another house and then took a barber shop on rent and then started a small clinic. 8 months of this clinic, and then, you know, the romantic ideas collapsed. I was really exhausted because I thought these stupid tribal people didn't really know, you know, what a great surgeon I was and all that. And I told Shalini, I think it's time to just go back. These romantic ideas are not working. And so she said, why don't you go and talk to this king? There was a king in that place. You know, in the olden days, all this was part of a kingdom. So there was a king and there was a palace, and he had a Zanana palace where he had 300 concubines, and he had many bastard children, and he had to let go of all these concubines because he didn't really have the money. You know, they had the Saliana. Government used to pay the princely estate some money, and that money had come to a stop. So he had thrown out all the women, and then there was this 300, you know, there was like a Zanana palace, empty. So Shalini said, go and ask the king for this palace, and then you can start a hospital. So I said, you must be joking. So she said, no, go tomorrow and talk to the guy. So here I am going to the king and saying, you know, he was a proper king, and he was called Your Highness. So I'm going to the palace, and I said, Your Highness, I'm a doctor, and I have a request. So he said, oh, so you think you're a doctor? Many people have claimed that. And he said, which side is the appendix, he said. So, so, you know, he was very disbelieving, and I couldn't really I told him, you know, I want your Zanana palace, I'll give you rent, and I want to run a hospital. He just laughed, and then he dismissed me. And then a few weeks later, there was a curfew in the whole of the state because the police and the army had come to a conflict, and the police had run amok. And so all the criminals had come out, and it was very unsafe to travel. And the queen fell and had a Colles fracture. And so they told her, actually there is a surgeon here who is not really too bad. Why don't you, Her Highness, why don't you call him? So they called me, and I fixed her. I mean, there was no x-ray, nothing. I assumed it was a Colles fracture. At any rate, it doesn't really matter. You know, as long as you pull and put a plaster, these things heal. And it healed. I gave her, you know, injection, diazepam, and then put a plaster, and she was well in 3 weeks' time. And then I had a note from the king saying, Dr. Shah, from Her Highness, saying, Dr. Shah, he wants to see you. And when I went, he gave me the keys for the Zanana palace. And so, I mean, started the... Well, initially the king thought I wanted the palace because of the concubines. And so we started the Jeevan Jyoti Christian Hospital, which became really very popular. And within, like 1 month's time, I was doing cholecystectomies and mastectomies and stuff like that. And it was one of the most popular hospitals in that area. I think Keith came and visited me when I was in that little barber shop. Is that right? Yeah. Yes. And so, you know, in 5 years' time, I became so famous that they wanted to consider me to be like an MLA in that state and all that. But by that time, Shalini had tuberculosis, and we had 3 children, and it was very difficult to cope. And so I sort of left there, and it was, we translated the Bible into the Gracia language, and there was a lot of huge tuberculosis development project and all that. Anyway, so that was one story. The other story is from Emmanuel Hospital Association. I was the director of EHA, which is one of the biggest medical missionary agencies in maybe the world, with 50 institutions all over North India, with close to about 2,000 employees. And but in the initial stages, there was a hospital called Kachwa Christian Hospital. And there was a medical superintendent, I won't tell you his name, he was the medical superintendent. And in our annual meetings, where all the hospitals present their annual reports, he presented a report saying he has run into a loss of 3 lakhs or something, and that he wanted the central office to reimburse him that money. And so we asked him, why is it when it was always making a profit, how did he suddenly run into a loss? So he said last year, there were 3 to 4 times the number of TB patients, and we gave away plenty of free treatment, and the hospital has run into a loss. But then we discovered that the number of X-rays, the number of AFBs and ESR didn't really match up to the number of patients that he was seeing, and there was some doubt about his integrity. So we had asked the auditor to do a little check, and they found that the vouchers that he was printing were fake vouchers. There was no such pharmaceutical company in Varanasi. And so I had to go and sack him. And so, Raju had just come from the UK. So I said, Raju, you also come with me. We are going to sack this guy. And by the way, he was an orthopedic surgeon. I mean, there's nothing to do with. So we went there and landed in the morning, and then he refused to budge because we had the evidence, but he said no. Then I said, okay, if you don't want to resign, then I'll have to transfer you, because if you transfer, you don't need. He cannot go to legal. He cannot take legal recourse, because transfer is what government understands. And so I transferred him to another place. So he really didn't have an option, and so we gave him the papers and all that, and then we retired for the night in the guest room in Kachwa Christian Hospital. I was in one room and Raju was in another room. They were not quite like these rooms. And about 12 o'clock in the night, 2 people came and knocked on my door. And when I opened the door, the guy came and said, my name is Sher Singh. And he had a gun. And then there was another guy with him, and he said, this is my assistant, and he had a big rod. And so they came into the room and they closed the door. And they said, so you are the big guy from Delhi who is trying to sack our boss. Then he said, we have killed 30 people, and I hear you have a wife and some children also in Delhi. He said, there is nothing. He said, we will finish all of them one by one after we finish you. I have seen a lot of martial art movies. And I know some of the moves. But then I thought, it may not be really wise to practice any of those moves at this time. So I was wondering what exactly to do. He said, so I said, Sher Singh, that's really fantastic. You say you killed 34. I said, you're so courageous, and I'm so frightened. I wish I had some of your courage. Tell me, how did you kill the first guy? Because I'd like to have some courage. So he said, I just went to the court, and the fellow was right there in front of the judge. I just shot him. And I just walked, he said. I have no fear, he said. After that, I used to just shoot people on the street, people who I don't like. I said, that's really fantastic. That is what happened. And then you did this, and what happens if police, when you see police? He said, nothing. And I kept on talking to the guy for about 2 hours.